I am actually in two places at once here. We have a group of members here in person in the office that have joined us, and then I know we have another larger group online that's tuning into the web event that we're hosting. So I want to thank both groups for tuning in today for this is the second webcast in this series that we are conducting. Last year, I'll give you a brief history of why we're even doing this. Last year, as everybody at IS and several of us in particular began to consider our business model and our membership model in particular, we started having conversations with some of our members that we knew had made adjustments to theirs or made decisions strategically to change their overall operating model. And as we started to talk to different organizations about the different approaches they took, we were learning scads of things and thought that there's an opportunity for us to share this even more broadly with all of our members, particularly of interest to those that have members of their own. Whether they're a federated organization, individual members, there's something relevant that you can pull from the lessons learned and the stories that we heard. And so before we go too far into the session itself, a couple things to note. If you want to ask questions throughout online, there's a Q&A function that you can find in the Zoom platform, and you can type your questions there. We're going to hold the questions till the end. In the room, we have microphones set around the table, and if you swipe your finger across the red flashing bottom button, it'll turn green, and you're good to go. That way, that'll just ensure everybody online can hear the questions that we're asking in person. And that's the rules. So I think we can just do this. In the last webinar, we heard from Jim Verman, the CEO at National Council on Aging, and several folks on his team about how they've incorporated social enterprise into their overall business model and framework. And today we're going to hear from another IS member who implemented a fairly significant overhaul to their business model and to many of their programs and to their database, and the list goes on and on. It, as I said, was fairly extensive, but I think we're going to specifically talk today about the membership structure and the framework that they landed on there. So we've got a great presenter. I'll tell you a little bit about Janet, and then I'll hush so that we can get to the meat of the matter. As Vice President with the American Alliance of Museums, Janet Vaughn leads the membership program that serves more than 35,000 organizations and museum professionals representing museums of all types and sizes across the U.S. and in more than 50 countries. She also oversees the suite of programs that are designed to nurture excellence in all museum operations. And Janet brings extensive experience in developing and implementing strategic plans at the Alliance. And as you'll hear, they transformed the membership and excellence programs. In addition, she brings insights into her role as a former director of a museum. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to the expert in the room and let her share with all of us.
Hey everybody, and thank you Troy for that nice introduction, and thank you for inviting me to be part of your business model series. Could we go to the next slide? Thanks. First, I'd like to help you understand our membership situation in 2011. Look at what we learned from the member survey and how we use that data to inform our decision making as we restructured the membership program, and then take a look at the impact of that restructuring. So next. First, let's take a look at our industry. There are at least 17,500 museums across the United States, and it's a really diverse field. As we like to say, it's A to Z, from art museums to zoos, and everything in between. History museums, historic sites, science centers, natural history museums, children's museums, and botanic gardens. And the sizes vary widely too, from the all-volunteer historical society to the Smithsonian. So it's a complex group of members that we're trying to serve. It's a $704 billion industry, which represents about 4.2% of the entire US economy. We sustain more than 400,000 jobs, And my very favorite statistic is that there are at least 850 million visits to museums each year, which is more than the attendance at all major league sporting events and theme parks combined. Next. Our museum ecosystem is really fragmented. AM is the national umbrella organization that represents museums of all types and sizes, but there are 7 national discipline-specific organizations. So for example, the Association for State and Local History, the Association for Zoos and Aquariums, the Association for Children's Museums. And then there are 6 regional museum associations, and almost every state has a museum association. And then there are groups for specialized museums, such as railroad museums, or maritime museums, or Jewish museums, or African American museums. And all of these associations are membership organizations, and they all offer some sort of resources and professional development. Next. So AM's membership program is a hybrid with both museum and individual memberships. And you can see that in 2011, a whole lot of people were choosing not to belong. Membership generates about 35% of our $10 million operating budget, and 3/4 of that comes from museums. Our museum membership at that time was based on a percentage of the museum's budget, with maximum dues of $15,000 and a minimum dues of $100. Individual membership is based on your career stage, student, professional, or retiree, with students and retirees paying $50 and professionals paying $90. And today I want to focus mostly on our museum membership, but also point out the important links that it has to the individual membership for us. So next. We reached an all-time high in museum membership in December of 2000, and that's represented by the light gray line at the bottom part of your screen. The top kind of teal line is the individual membership. The flat red line at the bottom is our industry members. So we reached the high in museum memberships in December of 2000, and then saw a steady 2 to 3% decline each year after that. The 2008 recession exacerbated our situation, as we also saw a decline in non-dues revenue. And we just knew that we couldn't continue with the status quo. In the depths of the recession, we could have been out of business in 3 or 4 years. So one board member said that we needed a disruptive gesture that would get the field's attention. And our COO put it more bluntly, saying that we needed to buy ourselves a future. Next. So in 2011, we conducted a survey of our member and non-member museums, and we asked them about the perceived value, cost, interest in different dues structures, and potential additional benefits. And we got a really high response rate. 25% of our members responded, and the responses came from the CEO or the COO level. So we knew that we were hearing from the decision makers, and there was great consistency in what they told us. Across the board, museums had concerns about the cost. They were having a more and more difficult time justifying membership. And you saw on an earlier slide how fragmented our museum ecosystem is. Museums told us that they were having to make choices between associations. Which one were they going to join? We also heard a great desire from the field that they wanted to speak with a unified voice in making the case that museums are essential. And we learned that the #1 reason for joining AAM is to gain access to information about standards and ethics. And I want you to pay a special attention to those last 2 bullet points, and then we can go to the next slide. As Troy mentioned, restructuring our membership was part of a larger transformation of AM that took place in 2012. We refocused our work, We redesigned our accreditation and excellence programs. We changed our name, we rebranded, we combined 3 separate websites into one, we moved to a different AMS, and we changed our accounting software, all in a 9-month period. Made for a little crazy making, but the linkage that I really want to point out here is that what we heard in the member survey, the desire to speak with a unified voice and the desire for standards and ethics, became our niche in that museum ecosystem. It became our tagline, and it was embedded in our revised mission statement. So that champion museums, nurture excellence, that was the driver behind most of the decisions that we were making at that time. So next. So we redesigned our membership program based on what we heard in the survey. Our overarching goal was to unify the field. If we want to legitimately speak for all museums, we knew that we needed a bigger market share. With the changes in our program, we hope to change the decision that museums were making from either or to both and. We lowered our dues so that museums could afford to belong to AM and their national discipline or their state organization, or AM and the state association. So we really wanted to change that decision equation for them. We moved away from a one-size-fits-all model to a tiered structure that gives museums flexibility in choosing the level of benefits and engagement that works for them. Our dues now are based on staff size as opposed to the percentage of budget. We eliminated the cost as barrier to participation, and we created an all-staff package so that more individuals can belong. And next. So this is a graphic representation of what the new membership structure looks like. So you can see that the benefits increase as you pay additional dues and move up in the structure. And then next. So I'll step through the benefits of each of the tiers and talk a little bit about the underlying philosophy for each of them. Most of the tier 1 benefits are things that have nominal incremental costs, such as e-newsletters. You know, if you send out 10,000 or send out 10,001, it costs you almost nothing more. We say in our tagline that we're committed to making the case for museums and helping all museums achieve excellence. So to demonstrate that commitment, that value that we have, we provide free access to 2 of our core books so that museums are armed with the information they need in these 2 areas. And then tier 1, we say that by joining, a museum adds its voice to our national advocacy efforts. And as we were simultaneously redesigning our excellence programs, what we call our continuum of excellence, we positioned membership as the first step on that continuum. Next. Tier 2 is enhanced access. At this level, a museum gains access to the members-only resources and gets discounts. So this is a self-service plus discounts tier. And again, with a focus on nurturing excellence, tier 2 museums receive a significant discount on accreditation. And I also want to point out that that linkage between the museum and individual membership programs, at this tier, staff at these museums receive a 20% discount on individual memberships. So instead of paying $90, the individual would pay $72. And then next. So tier 3 gives you everything. This is similar to the former benefits package, but with some important enhancements, things that we heard people value in the member survey. A number of the benefits are exclusive to this tier. The customized research, access to our sample documents, most of which come from our accredited museums, free online learning, either live and the library of about 80 recorded programs, and discounts on the annual meeting registration. And then staff at this level can purchase their individual memberships for 50% off, so they would only pay $45 for an individual membership. But the new benefit that's really received rave reviews from our members is the all-staff package, giving every staff member an individual membership at one low price. Museum directors have responded really enthusiastically about the chance to add a staff benefit and provide professional development for everyone. Next. So this is the dues structure. So you can see there are the 3 tiers, and then there are 6 staff size categories within each of the tiers. The top dues were reduced from $15,000 to $5,000, and we removed the cost barrier by making tier 1 literally pay what you can. It's set up so that you have to pay $1, but you can pay $1 and belong. So the new structure provides museums with that flexibility so that it's possible for a museum of any size, any type or size, to belong to the National Professional Organization. Some things that I might point out here, in counting staff size, we decided that we would ask museums to count only their full-time people. We know that museums use a lot of part-time and seasonal workers, but we didn't want to get into those complicated calculations of FTE. So we just tell them straight out, count your full-time people. You might notice that between tier 2 and tier 3, the dues double as you move from tier 2 to tier 3 at every level except for the smallest museums. So for the smallest museums, we only increase that $25 when you move from tier 2 to tier 3, because we really want our smallest museums to be able to afford everything that we have to offer for them. And also because our tier 3 museum, or the smallest museums, were the ones who saw an increase. The previous minimum dues had been $100. So if they wanted to keep that same level of benefits that they had, their dues actually went up. So we really tried to make it more affordable by making that jump between tier 2 and tier 3 kind of a gimme. If you attend one webinar throughout the year, you make up that difference as a small museum. And then also just to talk about the pricing for the all-staff package. So again, an individual membership, if you buy it independently, separately, is $90. So we price these so that if you're at the upper edge of that staff size category, the memberships are priced at $20 each. So if you're in the 4 to 10 category, you can buy the all-staff package for $200, which means that you get 10 memberships basically for $20 each, as opposed to $900 if you bought them separately. Or at tier 3, you get the 50% discount, so it would be $450, but it's still a significant savings to buy the all-staff package. For us, the benefit is that we increased our individual memberships significantly, and we're only chasing one renewal instead of chasing 10 individual renewals. We only have to get the museum director to make that decision to renew the all-staff package. Next. And then with the museum membership rollout, we also introduced some incentives for the individual membership that we've been talking about. So again, the goal was to get more people in the tent so that we could amplify our voice. And we also knew that each individual member spends an additional $30 with us on non-dues purchases, books, or registrations, or in just making an outright donation to us. So we were willing to reduce the individual dues in order to offset, because we knew that additional non-dues purchase would help to offset the discount. So next. So now it's 4 years later. So let's go to the next one and see some of the results. For the museum membership, within the first year, we reversed the 12-year decline and reached our highest membership in our 100+ year history. Next. We saw the museum membership has grown 76% since we launched the program in 2012. And we had tremendous growth in those first 2 years, but as you can see on the graph on the earlier slide, it's still increasing, but the growth rate now is much smaller. And I noted that our goal was to unify the field, to get more museums and more individuals in the tent. 4 years later, we're almost, but not quite, back up to the same revenue that we had before. So, you know, I think of it as like a teeter-totter. If you're going to drop the dues that much, you have to get a lot more members in order to achieve that equilibrium again. And we're almost there, but not quite. So we're looking at that graph. We're kind of wondering, have we plateaued? Are we nearing the plateau for our museum membership in the next couple of years? Is this going to be our revenue cap? Or what would it take for us to bend that curve up again? Next. Before we launched the new structure, there was some real worry among board and staff, you know, that we're taking a gamble with 35% of our budget, and was there going to be a race to the bottom? Would everybody join at tier 1? But happily, museums are joining and renewing at higher tiers than we had projected. New members are joining at 3 times. New members are joining at the top tier 3 times higher than what we built into the projected budget. Next. And so here's the revenue by tier. We do have a few museums that pay $1, $5 to join at tier 1. But a lot of our museums are interpreting pay what you can to mean pay as much as you can. So we have some museums who are paying $400 or $700 to join at tier 1. And the result is that our average dues payment in this tier is more than $78, which is significantly higher than the $25 that we projected as we were building all of this out. And then next. So here's the graph showing the impact on individual membership. And then next. Individual membership has grown 72% since 2012, with 9% growth last year. And almost all of that growth has come from the all-staff package. And I should note that the average $30 per member of non-dues purchases has held steady, even as the numbers have grown this much. And next, questions. I would be delighted to answer any questions that you might have.
Everybody in the room has been scribbling furiously, taking notes, so I'm sure we'll have some questions here. Nothing looks like in the chat function yet, but I imagine something will pop up. I was taking a couple of notes, and you answered one of the questions that I had about there's always the concern that you're going to have everybody moving down in your due schedule, and you know, that's one of the questions that we're wrestling with here. I'm curious how you sort of what algorithm or what predictive measures or metrics did you have in place to determine what percentage of your current members might move down in pricing in order to budget for the changes when you implement it?
We took a pretty conservative estimate as we were projecting this. You know, we were estimating that the tier 1 would be an average of $25 each, so sort of trying to be really conservative there. I think we were projecting that we would keep 40% at tier 3, so now that we're at 60%, that's to the good. So in budgeting, we were really pretty conservative of what the impact of this would be. And in trying to keep people at that upper tier, you know, we paid attention again to what we heard in that member survey, and we put the things that they wanted most at the top tier to encourage them to stay at that level.
And your top dues level before you moved to 5,000, just for clarification, was what amount?
15,000, and again, that was based on a percentage of budget. So we had, I think we had 80 or 90 museums that were paying at that upper level. And this is, I should point this out too, because we knew that as we dropped the dues and we hadn't started to ramp up the numbers yet, we were worried about what's that bridge between one model to the next. And so our CEO at the time, Ford Bell, made personal phone calls or personal visits to those 90 museums and asked them if they would stay with us at $15,000 for a 2-year transition period to give us some money to help us make that jump to the new structure, to help us make that transition to a more accessible program. And a really high percentage of them agreed to do that because they knew that, they knew that it was a 2-year period, so there was an end at the light at the end of the tunnel for them. But they also really appreciated Ford's personal appeal and appreciated what we were trying to do with the membership and opening it up. So that money that we generated from those 90 largest members helped us make that transition.
That was very helpful. Thank you for sharing. And we do have one question. I have my contacts in, but the screen is a bit far away. So what other approaches for membership structure were considered and why were they not pursued? I think I got that right. It's like an eye exam.
I don't know that we seriously considered anything else. We had been in our previous model for a lot of years, and it was bringing in a lot of money, but it was a lot of money from a few people, and we knew that some of our most loyal members, our biggest members, were having real struggles in making those dues. So we started early with a tiered structure and worked from that, and we continued tweaking it, but we didn't really look at anything other than the tiered structure in a serious way.
Any questions from any of the folks in the room?
So yes, I have a question. Could you speak a little bit more about your marketing efforts and what you did to sort of get the word out about the change in your membership structure?
Sure, and I referenced all of the changes that we were making at the time. So we had a really tricky rollout of all of this because we didn't want to launch the new website, we didn't want to launch the new name or brand or any of this piecemeal. We wanted to do it all at once, and so we knew that the end of summer is a pretty quiet time for us, that last week of August. So that was the week when we made all of the changeover with everything. Like the last, we went public with it the day after Labor Day. So during that weekend leading up to Labor Day, we were making all of the transition and hoping that not very many people would be coming to our website over the weekend, so that when we rolled it out on September 2nd, we could do it with a splash. We did all of the planning for the membership restructuring and all of the budget projections internally, just with staff, but we did hire a firm to help us with the marketing rollout. So because we needed to communicate to our members, we needed to make the announcement on the website. We were hoping to get some national coverage, and so we developed a really detailed communications rollout plan, including sending all of our individual members new membership cards. Those dropped in the mail on September 2nd too, along with a letter that detailed all of the changes that we were making, so that each of the individual members and each of the museum members got a letter from us in the mail within 2 or 3 days after we made the public announcement. And then something that we heard people really liked was every week we sent out another email communication to people announcing or explaining some aspect of the change that we had made. So there was just this, and I think we did that for 6 or 7 weeks. There was this steady drumbeat of information about it, so that they had that. We also did a series of webinars with people. Before we made the announcement, we did some webinars with some of our closest friends and family to announce the changes to them, to help them feel like insiders and so that they knew, but we didn't reveal any of the branding or the name change or anything like that to them. We just talked about the changes in the membership so that they could be our champions out there and help to spread the word and talk about it after we made the announcement. And then, as I said, after we made the announcement, we did a series of webinars that were available to people who wanted to learn more as well.
You answered one follow-on question I had to that question about how you socialized prior to the launch. So that was a really helpful answer. Thanks again for sharing that.
And one of the things we not only did it with our closest friends and family, the membership restructure, but we also talked with some of who we anticipated being our harshest critics. So we tried to co-opt them by bringing them in as insiders from the very beginning. So that they could understand the thinking and the reasoning that went on behind it, so that we hoped they wouldn't trash us on social media after the fact.
All right. Any other questions from the room? And I'm curious about anybody in the room. I mean, we're all scribbling, and IS has been looking at this. The very first thing I noted was the cost value benefits feedback from members in their survey. I think all membership organizations have heard that. Is anybody else considering or in the midst of working on changes to a model? Interesting. Yes, actually.
Yeah, so we have a slightly different issue too, because our membership spans a number of kind of different sectors, so to speak, both nonprofit and for-profit organizations and membership. And so we are looking at restructuring our dues tiers, in particular with a focus on some of our nonprofit members. We have nonprofit members who actually pay the most in dues in comparison to for-profit. And that is something that we're looking at. But I took a lot of notes because we have a number of things that have always been considered member benefits that we don't charge for. So things like webinars and annual conferences, and it's always been that way. And so it's also causing me to go, well, do we need to evaluate that if we bring that too? Because it is a lot of staff time that has to be accounted for.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And we have our membership committee is actually tasked with giving input on this and making a recommendation to our board. So it's going through us.
That's helpful. We had a similar approach last year with our Networks and Member Engagement Committee here, and they were extremely helpful in developing 3 perspective models. And I think it was informed by some research we did with a couple of outside groups that was also instructive in helping us think around what we might do. So I did find the committee, a lot of times people worry about their committees being a hurdle, but I found our group here to be an extreme in working on this.
And in ours too, we have 5 different ways the calculation is done based on type of membership. So it's simplifying as well.
That's confusing. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually have another question. So in the survey that you created, I work for GuideStar, and we're currently looking at changing up our tiers, and we want to get input. We don't have a membership committee or anything like that. But I'm just curious to the sort of level that you asked for input on a survey about tiers. I mean, how specific do you get? Is it just like, you know, what kind of benefits do you want to see with tier, you know, A, B, and C, or are you really trying to find out, you know, what they would spend money on? I'm just curious if anyone has any insight on that, just how to, you know, seek information from non-members and current members about the changes in tiers that they want to see.
We didn't give people, we did not propose tiers and benefits when we were doing the survey. We asked the questions around current benefits and asked both about their awareness of them and whether they valued them. And then we had a series of potential benefits that we were considering, and again, ask about, would you value this? So that helped us know what things people really cared about. And we found that we were offering some benefits that nobody really valued, so we just ditched them. But then we could see what do people really care about, and that's where, you know, we shoved as many of those to the tier 3 level as we could in order to try and incentivize people to stay at that top tier. And we currently are, we just last fall did a survey of our individual members and are considering changes to the individual membership program now, and going to instead of doing that life or career stage structure that we have now, just going to a tiered model where the more you pay, the more benefits that you get. And in that, we didn't propose it in different tiers. We ask about how they currently do value or how they would value certain benefits.
Go ahead.
So I can add to that. We did a survey of our members as well, and we actually did some focus group research, and we focused on the CEOs and the chief decision makers of staying in or staying out of membership. One thing that we found in getting the results of that is the CEOs were very unaware sometimes of how engaged their kind of GR people might be, or some of their other C-suite. And so we got back these results saying, yeah, that doesn't matter. And we're going, no, we know it matters. So we got, it was helpful, but not helpful, because we ended up having to do additional research.
We did 2 separate pieces of research. We did a broad survey to all members, non-members, former members. Anybody not nailed down around here got a survey from us, asking a lot of questions, particularly around the value propositions. But we also went out separately and pulled together a group of similar to, we first started with decision makers, but we have large and small and every size in between of funders, nonprofits, and corporates in our member base. And we tried to pull a broad spectrum of them and still keep it under 20 or so people total. So we did a CEO at a large funder and a CEO at a small nonprofit, and we did that whole thing. So we got the C-suite opinion, but we also then went for a mid-level and for an entry level, because we have our NGen program, which is leaders under age 40. And so we were able to, if they've opted into that, assume that they're an emerging leader. And so that's how we slice some of our individual profiling so that we could get at just what you're talking about, because a lot of times the C-suite, I won't just say the CEO, but the C-suite may not know what benefits are being used by some of the other folks. They just may be approving the invoice every year for renewal. And so, and then we had the opposite, where nobody else on staff is involved at all except the CEO. And so that's the other value point you have to contend with and account for. One other question, Janet, I had, and it was, it's, as I'm starting to talk, escapes my brain. Oh, it was around your individual category of membership. The other sort of issue that gives us heartburn in particular, we're an organizational only membership currently. And we do want to find out or think about how to engage grassroots networks of individuals, whether that's through membership or not, but we're worried about cannibalization. And so I'm curious how your model does it. Is it built to prevent cannibalization from the organizational higher dues payers to the individual?
Yeah, and you know, because when we started working on this in 2011, if you paid $90 to be an individual member or $15,000 to be a museum member, the benefits were almost the same. So it's like, well, why wouldn't you just pay the $90? So we spent a lot of time really teasing those benefits apart. What are things that should belong just to the organization? What are the things that belong to the individual? So, you know, for the discounts are institutional. They belong with the institution. Access to the sample documents. access to our purchasing co-op. All of those things are institutional. The things that we kept at the individual level are, we have 22 what we call professional networks, special interest groups. So we have 22 professional networks. You can only join those if you're an individual member. We used to give out a membership card to both museums and individuals. And our membership card is highly valued because a lot of museums honor it for free or reduced admission as a professional courtesy. So we took that away from museums and said, no, that's an individual benefit. So that's something that's unique to the individual. So we spent a lot of time trying to separate those out and think what benefits belong to which type of member so that it would be a clearer decision. We especially for the small museums, you know, they can say, well, I can pay $90 to be an individual membership and get basically everything I want. It's like, okay, well, if that's your decision, that's okay. But we didn't, I don't think we've really cannibalized the museum membership by having the individual membership at all.
No, it sounds like that the way you went about that ensured you wouldn't have much cannibalization. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that feedback.
We do have distinct individual, I'm with American Affairs, and we have a lot of consultants, independent artists that are members that wouldn't be affiliated with an organization ever. But we do encounter a lot of sort of what you're asking about. But the challenge is that we can't eliminate that individual program.
Yep.
So we have what we sort of did to make it easier for us to get organizations to upsell is that the basic one staff membership for an organization is the same cost as a basic individual membership. And then as you get higher, you know, in number of staff members, that there's a bigger discrepancy too. So we will, like if someone will say, I'm not sure whether to join as one or the other, I will try always to get to join as the org. So there's room to kind of add staff to that package.
That makes a lot of sense. And you mentioning Americans for the Arts, that's a perfect moment to give a commercial for our next webinar in the series in May, featuring Americans for the Arts. Nina is she's the executive director for their political action committee. It's a C4, and that's how they've chosen, or they have moved into working with grassroots networks, particularly around policy and advocacy work. So stay tuned, but I appreciate.
And bringing in the Action Fund, I mean, like we have the Action Fund, which has free membership. We have professional membership, and then we also have an individual giving circle. It's something that we struggle with a lot is figuring out, like, well, do we direct this person to free membership because they don't want to, or like, do we try to upsell them, or should we be sending someone that wants to be an individual member at like the highest $250 level? Should they really be giving to the annual fund because they have a capacity to give more? So I would be interested, I'm excited to hear what Nina has to say about sort of her piece of it.
Yeah, now that you're saying more about the overall model for both sides of that house, I'm intrigued by how you balance all of that.
Yeah, especially now that so many of our benefits are tied to like, we're making a lot of pitches around the venue being different. Yeah. So figuring out which pitches can come from which arms and like what things can we make members only that aren't going to go against the sort of mission goal of supporting the arts in America.
Yep.
Like what do we have to give people for free to advance that piece of the cause without, like you said, sort of cannibalizing our own people.
Yep. And you know, that's another issue that we've noted that we continually have a struggle internally. What do we give members only versus, because the work IS does is on behalf of the entire sector. So how do we balance that?
Right.
And that's a struggle. Janet, I'm curious, in the work with you guys, with the museums that you, I know you've got the or it's not a credentialing, it's a standards and certification program for museums. But do you find that you have the same internal conflict sometimes when you're trying to build value points into any of your tiers versus things that you would create and give to the world on behalf of your industry?
Yeah, you know, going back to our tagline of champion museums nurture excellence, and if you remember on the tier 1 slide that we made that decision that we have 2 books that we sell, and if you join at tier 1, even if you're a museum member at any tier, you get free access to those books on standards and ethics for museums and Speak Up for Museums, so our advocacy book, because that's our mission, so to provide information and to support museums in those 2 areas. So all of our advocacy stuff is free. You can come to our advocacy day free of charge. All of our advocacy tools and alerts are free of charge. And then our excellence, the standards and excellence materials are all free of charge on our website. If you want to participate in our excellence programs, there are fees for participating in those. So we have what we call our core documents verification, our museum assessment program, and then accreditation. And each of those programs has a fee if you want to participate in that and get that recognition. But the information about standards and ethics is free of charge to everybody.
Got it. Any other questions from the internet?
I have a question I'd like to throw out. So, you know, I mentioned that we're rethinking our individual membership right now, and we've always relied on members-only content as a key benefit, you know, having that member wall on our website. And I'm just wondering, we're wondering if that's still a viable business model in today's world. What do you guys think? What's your experience with that?
Most of our content you can purchase if you're not a member, but the cost is such that like buying a membership will cover a webinar, so that we make them pretty equal. We've just actually added our first piece of like truly member exclusive content, which is we're doing briefings around all the issue statements we put out. So we put out a statement about like the arch and jobs in the economy, and only members can get on the call where our staff breaks that down. But most of our professional development resources you can buy your way into. But you know, like if we have like a webinar series that's 3 parts that costs $150, it makes way more sense to just join. But there's almost nothing that's fully siloed.
Yeah, and it sounds like everything is behind the paywall. We've been the opposite direction for many years, and there again, with the mission and focus for us, we have more things in front of the paywall sometimes than I would like to have there, being in charge of membership. But so we struggle with that question and haven't found an answer. I'm curious if you guys.
We had a members only section of our website for quite a few years, and found that it wasn't being used. In fact, we spent more time sending people passwords and usernames than anyone ever accessed any of the materials. And again, going back to mission, you know, I'm with the National Health Council, and our mission is to provide a united voice for patients with chronic conditions. And so a lot of the work that we do, we want outside of our membership, and we want to be able to have accessible. So one other thing that we've struggled with, though, is that because we have 5 different types of membership, our patient groups have to meet standards in order to be in membership. So we've had internal thoughts about, well, you know, down for those groups, would we think about having to charge for the standards program, because it's a lot of staff time, the full review of all of their governance activities. So that's something else.
And Janet, for your accreditation program, you've charged historically since the program's been in place. Now you are offering the preferential pricing for members. Is that right? So I think you're taking the opposite approach.
Correct. It always had a price, and so our pricing model for that is that we figure out what it costs us, and so the tier 3 members pay the cost, and then everybody else pays the cost plus. So it looks like, you know, so you can look at it as a discount to the tier 3 members, but it's also knowing what our cost is, and then everybody else pays a premium. We
had that in a previous organization that I worked for. We actually had to go in and look by member segment at what the cost of serving a member was, and then figure out what our dues pricing model might be as we went forward with the new model. So it does help to know the cost.
Oh, I was just going to say, one of the recent things that we've kind of experimented with, sort of calling it a membership benefit, is the ability to interact with your peers. So I work for GuideStar, and our membership program is essentially grant-making foundations, and they kind of love to be able to talk to each other to find out, you know, what are the gates doing, you know, in this area of grant-making versus like the Mott Foundation or something like that. So we've kind of structured a members-only online community, which really isn't content-based. It's really just the ability for them to open threads and really get, you know, information from their peers. We've kind of struggled a little bit with getting it sort of off the ground, because really we have to, you know, push our members to open threads so it doesn't appear it's just like GuideStar people going in and, you know, answering our own questions or anything like that. So I'm just curious if you guys have ever experimented with an online community, or if you sort of structure the you know, benefit of, you know, your membership organizations being able to interact with each other as benefit.
Just did a big rebrand of the membership component specifically, and it was centered around the idea that being a part of the network is the most important benefit. We use listservs right now, which I would not recommend, and we're sort of looking at how to move away from that, maybe into something as simple even as like Google Groups, where there's a forum, but we use Outsoft, and it's been like, we have 2 of our listservs are very active, and they're the ones around public art, and we think that our suspicion is that those people have a lot more in common in terms of job function than our listservs that are about like art ed, where you could have 50 different jobs. So yeah, I mean, we're finding that people really are into the idea that the network is the benefit, but we are also sort of trying to pinpoint who they're thinking of when they think of their network. Like, are they thinking of, are Devo people thinking of other Devo people, or is it a theater development person wants to talk to other theater people? Like, how do you kind of help them connect those dots?
We have a single online community that we launched, I think in 2014. It's not restricted to members, anybody can join it. So we have 40,000 people who participate in that. If you are an individual member, you're automatically auto-subscribed to it and automatically subscribed to the Daily Digest. But then anybody can join, whether or not they're a member. And it's been really active. We've decided not to segment it down into, not to allow each of our 22 professional networks to have one, because I think that would just get to be too fragmented, and the conversations wouldn't continue. So ours is free to anybody in just one community.
I was just going to say that, excuse me, not at my current organization, but at my prior organization, the online listserv networking that we restricted to members only was the most valuable benefit of our membership program. People would not pay, and they would get cut off the Google groups, and the credit card would come out right away. Like, I don't know why that is, because I was pretty surprised, but it was the most important benefit, and they had to be on that Google group, and it was incredibly effective for membership retention, because they got cut off. They felt like they were missing something, they weren't part of the conversation. So in that case, my former organization, restricting it to members only made a huge difference, and people really didn't feel like they were part of the conversation of the industry unless they were on this listserv.
And were they industry conversations, or were they were an individual, I want to meet you sorts of?
No, and there was a little bit of the organizational members were promoting their own activities and their own research, but it's an extremely close-knit industry, so that they all wanted to know what each other was doing in a real sort of collegial way. So it would be press releases, but webinars, but also people would send around an article in the Washington Post, have you seen this, you know, sort of all related to what the industry was talking about. And I just was really surprised at what a powerful tool that was to drive membership, that people wanted to be part of that conversation.
And that's what I thought of before when you said sometimes CEOs are super disconnected from how, like, we'll have the same, someone will get kicked off a listserv because their CEO has declined to renew, thinking that they haven't used the service, like, the service is at all, and the staff member usually freaks out to a level where the CEO is like fine. But so that's the prime example we have of, like, they really do, like, the public art people in particular, like, really use that service. And a lot of times they're so disconnected from the person making the financial decision.
Yep. We actually, in one organization I was with, realized that most of the time it was the folks at the low C-suite level using the membership. And we started a renewal series to send at the closer to the point of expire. And basically it was, we sent everybody that was connected to the organization's membership a note saying you're about to expire. This guy is your contact for membership. We haven't heard from them. You might want to let them know. It works really effectively, actually.
We've had to do the same thing. I mean, just the rate that, grants managers kind of move around at, within the industry to different foundations.
We've had some churn over the last year at all levels, particularly C-suite level.
So we've just, again, had a hard time sort of tracking down the one decision maker. So we really try to get an email address for as many people at that organization to make sure that we can at least contact someone when their, dues are up. And we also, again, work for GuideStar. So one of our big pushes is to get nonprofits to fill out their nonprofit profiles. So we've sort of had to, use those email addresses to sort of ping them that it's time to update their data as well.
We've got a couple minutes left. One, I think I have a housekeeping note to remind everybody that we're going to send a link to a survey, just a follow-up couple questions about this webcast, but also we'll have the presentation, a link to the presentation. And Janet, I know we talked about the full case study and providing that out. So I think we have that from you also that we're going to send out to everybody. And it does go into much more detail. It's really good stuff. I've read it several times and highlighted a few things. So look forward to that. And then hopefully we will see some of you in the office, and then if not online for the May webinar. So thank you, Janet, very, very much for sharing this story. And thank you to all of you and everybody else who joined us.
Thanks.